Okay, let's start section. Today I'm trying to guide you on writing the full papers. We have talked about this in another section, but I think we have not really organized and talked in one go from one slide. So this is my intentions to once again go through the topics again, which is very important, writing papers and also the ethical issues in publishing, which involves not only publishings, but really your entire thesis and reports writing. And we will have two parts. One part would be on the writing and which you will learn about the how you're going to compose the structures of your writing and things that you need to include in the contents from extracts through introductions to literature reviews to methodologies and results in discussions and conclusions. And part two is just bring your attentions back to some of the ethical issues that you need to really pay attention because in research our job is to provide a valid presentations of what we studies and so that people will be able to apply our research finding and discussions uh, for for the continuing efforts in their own research. And also the practitioners can use because they have a clear background of what we are doing in our research through our ethical integrity. They have the confidence and trust and clarity in using our research, and that means we are actually doing a good job, social job, right? Social responsibility for the society. And so it is very important that we discuss also on the ethical perspective, but I will look at the ethical perspective from a theoretical ethical theories perspective and paradigmatic perspective, which is more broad-based, and the details you can go to Google and find it out. So part one. Well, part one is really about the full articles writing. And so when we talk about a full article, we are really talking about a research, right? A research which involves the knowledge and theory on the one hand, and the corresponding uh, data which corresponds to um, an application, a research issues or problems that we deal with, and the relationship between the theory and the data uh, that makes the whole research complete and with integrity. And so research could be induction in the sense of completely induction in the sense of we studying grounded from the practical data, empirical world, and then we slowly identify the patterns and hopefully able to locate some explanation and the theoretical structures to explain the empirical world. Or we can start with some literature backgrounds, which is for some research problems. We already have a lot of uh, built in, or a lot of theories already have been discovered. And although maybe, not exactly we will fit in with that kind of theory, but we can use sufficient amount of theories to infer and to deduce and to arrive or to hypothesize at the structures of theory that we think are appropriate to help us solve, help us understand our empirical world. So, which is the deduction, or you can back and forth in that sense. And paper writing, as I already mentioned, we will basically cover those area and references. I will leave it to you because this is not that difficult. You can go to any research article, published article, and find out easily and learn how to do the citations and references. And title and extractions very important because that is where the first impressions are when you meet someone and someone's whether like you or dislike you, and that is the first impression. And for researchers, we need to demonstrate the titles uh, with the impressions that they can tell uh, how strong we are in terms of our research understanding and our own disciplinary background and expertise. And so this intellectual impression is very important. The types of extracts and the types of the way we write an extract and the contents in the extract and the type of titles really demonstrate how how far we are in terms of our research capabilities and efforts. And if we are up to date with our research and the titles revealed, and if we are not we are just a novice, the titles against review, maybe we will work on a very simple titles which is very trivial. And so the titles really really important, and it really tells a lot of story. That's what we mean by informative and descriptive, in the sense that it is sufficient, it has sufficient information and to help us understand the context of our research and the situations of research and how and expecting and anticipating the outcomes, and that is especially in the extracts. Okay, so these are very important. Usually when we write an extract, it is even though it is freestyle, though some papers do have some formal requirements that you gotta do this, you gotta have this. For example, you gotta have the problem statement form, uh, and you need to have your objective, or you need to have your anthologies, or you need to have your short summary and discussion. But otherwise, they are quite freedom in the choices. But even though free, we still follow some logical sequence. And so it is very important that you need to know the sequence so that you can, uh, within that extract, tells the story of what, and lead people to understand what they expect to understand and get from your research. I think, and then they can work from where you are, and so that is what we mean by contribution on top of each other's, right? The knowledge expansion. So we lay the groundwork for other peoples to continue, right? Things like that. So this is what research. So we humbly lay the groundwork and do and the extractions. We have four parts. Usually, the first thing is to tell the problem, where are our problems, and what why this why we are solving this issue, why we are tackling this research. And so these are the motivation. So you got to tell people, you have to let people know what motivate you to do this research, and hopefully the readers reason in the same way as you are, and of course they will come up with some other additional motivational rationalities and reasons, and from there they will work from where you are, and that is all right. No need to tackle all the perspective. You just look at one perspective and leave the rest to other people, and this is what we do in terms of research. So motivations really is reflect on what you're targeting at, and the purpose which involves the sort of the radical contributions or the gap that you're addressing, and that would be your purpose, right? Things like that. And the second part is that once you understand, once you state your motivations, whether you want to fill a gap or you want to contribute to certain perspective, or you want to expand certain things, or you want to incorporate a different domain of disciplines to help you understand this, or just like a metaphor that you understand and transfer from one knowledge area domain to another knowledge domain. So that motivation will lead you to design a method and procedures of how you're going to go construct your construct your research, right? And that is very, very important. Your methodological descriptions of your research effort. And then the next would be quickly and sharply uh, uh, focus on the key results that you have demonstrated, that you are able to derive, and could something that in conformance with your theoretical arguments, or there are certain very different types of finding, and you can some kind of key and important uh, differentiated and importance results that you uh, identified and determined from your results from your data analysis. You can report in these sections, and then follow the last part, which is really nothing but have quick discussions, conclusions, and implications or recommendations, and that would fill up and your conclude your extraction. And again, as I told you, some of the journals would demand that will give you a proper sections to fill, so they require you motivations in terms of the information about your problems and background, and the methods uh, that you used, and the result that you find. And again, we have already said about results in the discussions. What does it mean to on your results in positioning relative to the literature reviews, and in view of your research problems. And then after you have done it, make sure that all this really makes straightforward and important intellectual sense, which means you can ask yourself, so what? What was your discussions really okay, and did you elaborate, that is, things that are not necessary and redundancy things, or did you go straight to the point, and did you elaborate too much, or just enough, sufficient? All this issue you have to uh, reflect upon it, and then make some adjustment. And title is very, again, considered the yellow persons pop up in differentiation from others. So something's very unique, as I already demonstrated your intellectual capabilities, intellectual positioning of your papers, right? And so something standing up from the field, from other papers in the field that you're studying. And and uh, and to do a good job, you really have to uh, don't take things for granted, and just go through reading your articles again and again, and then see how they fit into your title, and see that your extracts really in alignment with your articles. And otherwise, when the editors, when they go through the edition and the peer reviews, they will find out that your extract is not reflecting in alignment with your articles layout and the efforts, and that would cause a lot of difficulties in the acceptance and the back and forth. And avoid abbreviations, because no one will understand your abbreviation. Limits the words, usually 100 words, sometimes 150 words, sometimes slightly more, but usually it's about 150. And you make sure that one way to help you on your abstractions is to that each sections of your papers, introductions, literature reviews, must have certain very important keywords, that you can combine all those keywords and use it for your extraction. So kind of repetitively, reinforce on the key things that you have found, and in your extracts. Okay, and use something sentences that are short, yeah, and so that you can break it down into motivations and so on and so forth in a concise manner, right? So the language that we use has to be very concise, very simple, and and short sentences. Critically revise the title and extracts every time the main text undergoes revisions. As I told you, the alignment is very important. Anything that you change, it will also change the titles that that will reflect your articles, and also the the extract sequence and the way you deliver your messages, make sure that it in alignment with your article. Now that we have done with the introduction, the extract and title, and let's next move on to introduction. It is very important that you introduce yourselves well. So it's just like attractive packagings that they have not got into your contents, but they know what you're doing. What is this packaging? What is this package for? And so you must be able to tell right away, tell people, convince people that what is this for, and so people can buy it and take it apart and start to digest, eat it, consume it. And so, very important that we have to know why we are doing these things. Introduction is about why this research is very important. Why we're doing this research in what perspective that we are focusing on this research via what entry points and in what way. So basically, we have to uh, uh, that kind all kind of this why the problems, and but we have to present in a very convincing factors manners, and so we therefore we need to present all these problematic issues that we are going to handle in a very robust convincing manner. So we need to provide some analytical uh, judgment, analytical convincing issues and facts and through validation. So how we do that, we can present, make sure that we can present with a good storyline. Why this is so important that we focus, for example, on resource based views of competitions rather than market positioning perspective of the competitions, and you got to tell the very important storyline and tell the background information about the problems, that if you, for example, if you keep on focusing on the market positioning, you probably have to react and re-react again. So it's kind of a very rapid continuous adaptations to market changes, which makes your companies in a continuous cycles of dynamism. But on the other hand, if you focus on resources and capability-based perspective, you probably have a more stabilized situations to for your companies to breathe, to be able to compete in a more stable manner, and use that to adjust yourself to the changes in the society. I mean, in the industries and in the competitive environment. And so you got to provide some arguments, right? In arguments about your storylines, arguments about and story you can tell, give examples that many company has done with that resource space are able to be demonstrated to be longer in terms of sustainabilities in competitions or whatever. So you got to tell some storylines and the background and some theoretical foundation. What does it mean by resource based versus the market positioning and so on and so forth. Until you are able to get a convincing understandings of your the entire problems that and the way of you solving the problem. That means that you're able to introduce the to the overall structures of the entire issue that you of the issue that you are working on, and once you are able to lay out this introduction in a holistic sense, eventually it will lead to conclusions that what you really intend to do. So you kind of provide the objective, the purpose of your study. And so the purpose of this study is to blah, 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 blah. And in order to get into that purpose, maybe you need to involve with certain kind of research questions or in a more positivistic sense, maybe some hypothetical uh, statements could follow be informed by the resource-based view in such a way that the resources-based view demonstrated that maybe certain hypothesis or certain hypothesis that has not been properly executed or empirically tested and studies in other papers that probably you want to incorporate and extend on it and things like that. So you have to and of course whatever the things that you want to study, the purpose and research question, you must ensure that that and convince people that what you do are not trivial, that it really right, just like I told you, even though the resource-based view that people has a lot of people has a lot of researchers has already gone through it, but then you come up with something very unique in terms of resources. Maybe it's the way you combine resources with the positioning that determines a new hypothesis, or maybe the way you turns the resources to be uh, towards the core competence dimensions, or the way you uh, focus on the dynamic natures of the resources, or maybe you focus on certain perspective of the core capabilities of how to exploit the resources, or maybe you kind of in alignments show the alignments between resources and the opportunity, or maybe innovations and things like that, and so including the study design and significance of your research problems. Very important. Study design means that how you're going to approach those how you're going to approach your research to address those research objectives, and sometimes it needs a long longitudinal process in such a way that you got to track and follow for long times. And otherwise, sometimes it's a snapshot cross-sectional issues, and sometimes it is action research and things like that. So, anyway, introduction, you hopefully you're able to describe the natures of your problems and that why in that kind of natures that things are very important and what perspective that has not been resolved and so important, so significant that you need to do. And in order to get the solution, you may have to follow certain design steps and things like that. So all this you can cover in your introduction. Of course, papers writings in the journals are shorter, but in the thesis you have to go through section by section. So in conclusion, the structures of introductions can be visualized as a phantom, right? So it's like a readers, you give an overall perspective of what you want to do and where are your problems and the nature of problems and why you need to handle and to address these research problems, and then it ends up that you come up with a clear directions, a research purpose, research objective, right? And then from there, you can go all to your literature's reviews. Okay, so this is so we at the introduction establishes the context and gives very wider perspectives of what you're going to do, and then slowly focus on what perspective that you need to do and why it is so important to do this, and then conclude that you're going to do certain things. Okay, be aware that some of the if you submit your articles to some journals, and make sure that you read the articles, the journals, and try to see any kind of the articles published in journals that you can cite, right? And that would demonstrate that you have shown a very high interest with the journals, and they do appreciate that you cite their own journals. Now comes with the literature reviews, because we know that research is a continuation from other people's built on their research, and then so everybody builds certain knowledge and delivers certain knowledge, and the knowledge generate more knowledge. And so when we do research, really we have a lot of friends, right? It is not a lonely job. We have so many people has helped us, and they have published the work in the world. You and they are all willing to help us, and they in fact have already published their works to get ready to help us. So a good research really is nothing but uh, advances our collective understanding, right? Which really means that we help each other. Okay, each one's built on certain perspective of knowledge, and then we continue from there. Okay, so very important is that we have to understand the uh, this literature's reviews. Therefore, we need to read the literature's review. We need to review every other people's doing. A substantive and thorough literature review is a precondition for doing substantive and thorough research. If you want to do something, don't pursue, uh, uh, that we are the only one working on this topic, and that is wrong because everyone has already, the world is big, everyone has already done a lot of job, and even though maybe the same problems, but everybody's look at the problem from different angles. I look at from the social angle, another person look at the psychological angle, another person look at from the technological angle, another person look at social technical angles, or another person look at the process angle, another person look at the antecedents factors angle, another persons may look at the consequential angles, and maybe other persons look at the cross-disciplinary angles, and maybe other people look at the mathematical angles. So it is very important that we have to read the literature reviews, and sometimes all these different angles can be combined and forms a very a good collective understanding that we can advance even all this integration. So today's studies built on yes, yesterday uh, yesterday's alphabet. Okay, so just top it up one by one. Okay. The other issue is that everybody has solved different problems and come up with different suggestions and directions for different types of problems. All different types of problems also overlapping with each other. It is not necessary that we solve the same problem, and all different problems could have share similar common theoretical framework and theoretical background and the logical uh, arguments, and so it is very important that we our research effort on our articles be able to position how in that literature review. So it means that it's like literature reviews like the market. This way is our product. How can our product be positioned within that uh, available market? We going to position as cost competitive, or are we going to position in terms of brand differentiations or convenience of assessing the product, or what? So it is very important that we learn to position our research in the literature review, because if we, and this is starting from literature review chapter 2, but if we can position our literature or research correctly and uniquely and strategically and logically, meaningfully in the literature review, we can use that to help us discuss in chapter 4, the discussion section, very easily. So there is a connections between chapter 2 and chapter 4. I mean the discussion sections after the results. Okay, so how you position is how you discuss, and because your positioning, right, delivers the values, right, value proposition, right, just like marketing, and so you first of all you position it and your value proposition, and then after you execute and implement it, the customers will perceive in along that perspective, right, on what you position, and if that match well, then it creates the perception perceptions of customer value and the in alignments with the customer's value proposition, and that delivers brand trust and brand commitments and customers engagements, and then expands your uh, and sales and revenues. So literature reviews, therefore it's just like introductions that you really have to like fund those from your context and addressing the research problem all the way to research objective, and then you do the literature reviews in views of both perspective and such as you may discuss the historical context and what has been available in the literature reviews, the uh, evolutions of the competitive strategy theory, and then what has been done to in the past to help you address something similar to your research objective, and then how would you advance them, right? How would you advance them through a different angle, or you want to continue in the historical angle, which is also possible, and there are still a lot of contribution. Doesn't mean that we always need to move on to the new. Every angle has possibilities of contributions, and whichever angle you select, make sure that you do it rigorously. Validity, reliability, which we have talked about, and generalizability. So and from there, you decide. Once you decided, then you determine what kind of the what you're going to do, methodology, whether you in view of the nature of your research objective and the nature of your available knowledge, they're sufficient enough for you for quantitative methods, or are they insufficient and therefore you need to better utilize qualitative, or you can uh, use the mixed quantitative and qualitative, and then from there you can work on your research samples and problems, and so that so you are covering what kind of applications and audiences and corresponding policymakers and practitioners. So really the samplings operations will also, and plus your theoretical research objective areas will determine where your papers will be most probably be looked at it and be interested in, and things like that. And in view of all this process of the literature review, there are many ways we can cover our literature review. We can cover through narrative integrative reviews. Okay, or very systematic reviews or meta-analysis reviews, so we can systematically review our all the literature reviews, systematically go through different angles, and maybe from the historical issue, maybe from the theoretical background, maybe from the methodological sections, maybe from the applications and so on and so forth. And then we can systematically, step by step, or maybe we can focus on some theoretical perspective, and integrate any kind of concepts that can help us to understand our research objective in an integrated sense, rather than systematic. Or maybe we can focus on look at the patterns, just like qualitative research, and we look at the patterns of the literature reviews, and what variables are significantly important, and what things are influencing what, and we do a meta levels of analysis on that. Or we can focus literature reviews very exhaustively, focus really reviewing all kind of the journal articles and text and things like that. Or we can choose some important citations and some selective articles, or some very representative articles that are significantly important in the relative, for example, to the ethical theories, maybe the ontological theories, maybe the virtual theories, or maybe the theory of comparative advantages, or something very central, very important, something very pivotal. Like Michael Porter talks about five forces, and if you are focusing on industry structures, maybe you really need to work on this central or pivotal article. And your presentations could be, you can present your literature reviews in the conceptual, organizing, integratively organizing or systematically reviewing or meta-analyzing, and presented it in the conceptual sense. Or maybe you present it in a way that how different people's different methods, different theoretic theories or methodologically covered, and why these methods are using this, why these theories are more skewed towards these methods, and why not skewed toward, why not using another methods. And so you kind of, it really depends on your research arguments and your research objectives. And for example, we can focus on in strategic management. I mean, we can review that majority of the after the systematic and meta-analysis and integrated reviews, exhaustive rate or whatever, we really identify that most of the research were done on quantitative and qualitative, and but they are basically focused on typical structures of theory, and never really look at the from the phenomenological grounded theory perspective in such a way that we really instead of focusing on contents or strategies that has been prescribed by a strategic structure, why not focus something that just go and interviews people on how do you do your strategy, and then from there maybe you will come up with something more dramatically different from the previous literature's argument. So really, again, it depends on how you present your literature review. So presentations could be conceptual, could be historical, can be methodological. Historical contains from one end of the progress of theories all the way to today's, and then in view of today's era that is moving toward internet, what you think would be the next his, progress. And so do not think that historical is just the past. Historical can be extrapolated to the future. So again, it depends on how you present your literature's review. And just a little bit detail is that in the literature review, you can go very deep to cover some topic, or you can go very wide to and even cross the boundary to borrow and to understand how outside disciplines are looking at their problems, and how can we incorporate the outside boundary to help us solve the inside contextual issue. So again, these are really logical reasoning in your literature approach. So something, if your problem area is relatively new, maybe you can go over to the edge of your literatures, disciplinary literatures, and to find out something from outside. If you're working in a more thoroughly explored areas, very deep area, maybe you have to go find some new topic and or some narrow topic and go all the way deeper and find out what happened in that particular area, right? So it really depends on your research problem, and you can really design your focus, okay, in the sense of depth and in the sense of breadth of coverage. And again, depth and breadth of coverage can go back to what we have just discussed in terms of historical methods and contents theory, outcomes applications, and things like that. Okay, and when we do the literature review, it's very important that we have a good parallel to understanding to information's value, because information is has is relative to the time as well, because the society progresses, as time progresses, and some old informations may not be relevant. So you really have to look across the time and see something you can exclude, that you should not include in your literature review, and some are very authoritative that you must include, and some comprehensiveness that you need to cover, and the topicality that deals with your topic must be included, and something relevant and that you also need to be included, and in terms of your breadth. So this kind of thing you can intuitively picture that uh, 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 across the time, and even at a cross sections, what kind of relevancies and breadth and depth and comprehensiveness and topicalities and something that you need to exclude or include, that you need to in consider, right? The currency, the right time at this moment in times, and how relevant is to the literature review articles to today's environment, right? Relevance, currency, right, and relevancy. Okay, and some things is not available, you cannot find, you cannot include in your literature review. So these are all very important scopes of coverage, right? Topicality and subject area comprehensiveness and breadth and things like that. And so it's just literature review. It's just like casting net for fishing, and so it depends on whether you want to cast a representative fishes, or you select a certain importance coverage, something very pivotal, or of course something got to be bounded. You cannot go and design as big as you can, and it's going to take a lot of time and right and digest all kind of fishes, right? So you really have to have a bounded condition, bounded coverage, and then from there you choose what kind of things you need to review. Okay, so when I ask you to do the literature review exercise, and that would be something that you need to cover. And then after that, once you get ready with all the knowledge, you know what knowledge is, you have already set up the knowledge here, you know what knowledge is going to help you to move forward, and you already integrate certain perspective and knowledge in the shape of conceptual model that will allow you to move forward, and you already sort out certain arguments that allow you to that will guide you in the direction of your hypothetical arguments and things like that, whichever you do. Okay, or maybe you do the literature review and come up with a certain in terms of qualitative research, maybe you use the literature review instead of coming up with hypothesis. You kind of sorting out the identify the research questions from, you know, after you do a lot of research, you find that this question has not been explored or very important relative to your objective, and so therefore the research question is blah 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 blah. Or maybe you come up with some propositions that you are not so clear, you want to uh, further validate, further confirm it, and things like that, and make it clear, and turn it into hypothesis through your mixed methods, whatever. The next one is the methods. The method sections is you have the introductions, knowing why you need to do the job and your research objective, and then you already have the sufficient research knowledge and background that then you can you can start implement and start working on your research, and and by working on a research, your objective is slowly moving uh, uh, into the data section, and via the method. So method is the enabling force, right? It enables the introductions to go to reach out to the result section. Okay? And again, the method sections tie the introduction to the result sections to create the storyline that you have already tell and described in your chapter 1, and through your chapter 2, intellectual knowledge. Storyline is important in the sense that it gives the presentations an easy touch, right? A very lively touch. The people know where is your story is, starting from the very beginning, and they follow your story from introductions to literature reviews to your methodological sections, and then eventually to your conclusions and the discussions too. So it presents the approach to answer the research objective question. So you have the research objective question in chapter 1, introduction, and so the methods, it's the ability to help you address all this issue. and also define in your methodological discussion. It also define the structures of your results. So if you say, you're gonna, for example, you have a theoretical framework, and in your literature reviews, you suggest many different types of hypotheses to address your research objectives and question. And then from there, in your method sections will involve this and that, and such as the validations and reliability testings and relational studies, or or maybe some statistical regression analysis or whatever. And then these all these structures of the analysis and your results will be captured through your methodological sections, and make sure that you complies in an adequate sense, that you things are valid, things are reliable, that you strictly adhere to ethical protocols. Okay, when you conduct the research, so methods is very important. It is demonstrating how you're going to improve, how you're going to implement from the research objective to your to implement it and get a lot of data, and then you can slowly analyze it and get the results, and then discussion and back to your literature review. So you right, you from your literature's reviews and background, and okay, and then all the way to your research objective, and then to your method sections, and then to your back to your literature review again. So we need to build a methodological skeletons. What kind of things we need to do methodologically? For example, the sampling skeletons, in the sense that the startings we need to deal with what kind of cases we need to study, and why are those cases, and then how do we find the cases? Are they sufficient enough? And then we discuss all this, and then from there we how we gonna collect the data, and then from when we collect the data, how do we collect the data? Is it from interviews, or is it from questionnaire surveys, or is it from other things, observations? And all these are methodological skeletons that we need to discuss them, and through the design, okay, and things like that. So we need to explain when and way the study was conducted. It's like, as I say, how the sample was recruited and selected, and what things are included, and what things should be excluded, and which samples should be included, which samples should be excluded, okay, and things like that. And sample sizings, or for quantitative, or for qualitative representation, that can help you to develop build theories, maybe theoretical saturation samplings or whatever. With regard to the data collection, define what and how you will measure. Okay, so you certain data collections involves qualitative, that you need to design a questionnaire. So how are you going to, and which involves the a questionnaire design for all the variables that you have demonstrated in your literature review. So for all the variables, you need to have proper definitions, and how do you can design, and based on these definitions, what kind of questionnaire that can help you to deliver the measurement. So this is called operationalizations. We have already talked about it, and then all in quantitative data collections. Maybe you should also demonstrate that you will go through with maybe, for instance, grounded theory, such as first of all you will study the interview scripts, and then from the interview scripts you can identify all kind of category, and sorting up those category into themes, and then group all the themes into a bigger names, some sort of aggregate names and things like that, and then make sure that everything is linked to your research objective, and your theoretical understanding, and so that it goes from your open coding the the all kind of themes and category and the cross category, and then link them together into according to your research objectives and context, and so it moves to Asia coding, and then the relationship between variables start to forms, and you can and then exploit different cases to help you explain all this relationship between the different variables. So we're looking into selective coding. So again, all these operationalizations and things that in the methodological rigority sense you have to discuss in your methodological section, so that people know how you turn data into how you measure things, and how do you exploit those measurements and turn it into conceptual. So right, so quantitative is from conceptuals from concepts uh, to the empirical data. So you need to have conceptualizations of the variables, and then operationalizations to questionnaire, and then to the data. For operation or from qualitative, you need to have the data and how you're going to use the open coding and Asia coding and selective coding, as I just demonstrated to you through the grounded theory, and operationalize it all the way to the conceptuals conceptual model. And so towards the conceptualizations backwards, right? So one is inductions, one is deduction, but the processes has to be reliable and demonstrate validities. Okay, so and again, the qualitative is that you start from a concept, okay, extract concepts and constructs. You have two variables, for instance, x causes y, which is a theory, and then make sure that you have a clear, I mean, those are all extracts, right? So you need to really have a conceptualizations of all x and y, and then from there you can uh, operationalize it, such as through questionnaire, and design it properly, and then and then you provide measurement scales like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, strongly disagreed, it's one disagree, it's two, and then three neutral, and then four agree, and five is strongly agreeable. It becomes your indicators, and so people will respond to your operationalized statements of the extract through the indicators of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so you get a lot of data, and from there you can analyze statistical analysis and see whether and with the significance far less than or equal to 0.01 or 0.05, then you can see whether the hypothesis, the H1 alternative hypothesis like X causes Y is very supported or not. And so this is a deductive process. Otherwise, you can go through the inductive processes as I just mentioned, that you have a lot of data, and these are qualitative data that the people talks about it, which is interview scripts, and from interview scripts you operationalize using your the grounded theory processes, and eventually arrive at certain types of concepts and the relationships of the concepts, and that is arriving at the theory, and that is the inductive process. Okay, so method. In your methods, avoid putting the result in the method sections. Method is just talking about the methods. Do not focus on your results. So leave the results to the result sections, as there are various ways to answer the research question, and try to explain where necessary why you made certain methodological choices, right? And why you think there are the best option for your research. All this should be covered in your methodological section, okay, and things like that. After you have drafted the method section, ask yourself, will the researchers be able to reproduce your study? It is very important that your methodological sections are clear, so that people can know your sequence of your methods, so that they can replicate. Because one of the key why we do literature reviews and read literature review, because we want to know how people are doing, so that we can replicate methodologically, right? And not only the literature intellectual sense, intellectual knowledge sense, but also in the methodological sense. So it is very important that we demonstrate how the query so that the researchers are able to reproduce them systematically in sequence, and that gives reliability, right? That means people trust on your methodological process, and it gives a very stable, very robust foundation to your research, for people to trust on your research, and leading to reliabilities and validity. Okay, and check whether you discuss any unnecessary thing, delete all kind of unnecessary things and focus only on your story, dominant story that you want to tell, okay, and then describe them. The result sections, coming to the results sections, which is after you have the methodological section, you use the methods, and then you analyze, you collect the data, and then you analyze the data. So the methodological sections talks about data collections and data analysis, and so you accomplish those, and it would turns into a whole bunch of analytical data, and the data that went through analysis. Okay, and so the result sections presents clear, concise, and objective descriptions of your finding, which is your data analysis, and there are not no need to give interpretations. You can leave it to a discussion section, and so that result just presenting, okay, is the correlational issue, validity issue, reliability issue, to make sure that everything was done properly, and then there was some regression correlations and things like that, or structure equations modeling, or statistical significant differences between one group to another groups, and whichever, discuss them. No need for interpretations, and leave it to discussion. So the result sections mirrors the method section. For every method, there is a result. Okay, so if you say you're gonna, so it's very easy that you look into your when you write chapter 3 methodologies and the results sections, each one of those are tailoring each other. So something you have here, something you have there, right? So if you miss something in here, that means you also some that you have to correct it. Ideally, the result section is a dynamic interplace between text and figure. So you have in the result section, you have a lot of text and figure. But when you write your results, and try not to repeat unnecessaries and all the tabulars and figured, numbers, and which is like, you already, people can see, and why you're repeating it again. So okay, so very important, okay, that you really have to sharply present them in such a way that it doesn't unnecessarily repeating the unnecessary thing. Keep the storyline of your papers in mind when writing. The result is very important, so that people knows what is your presentation, what is your story, starting from the story, intellectual story, the literature review story, that in alignment with the research objective, and the story that in alignment with the research background. All these stories flowing from one end to the all the way to your result section. And if the way every time when you write is following the same story, that means that you are not moving back and forth from one end to another end, so that people read very smoothly, and that you can publish your papers easily. Finding in the result sections to match the answers and answer the research question. Okay, from your introduction. So whichever research objective, the question that you ask in your introduction, make sure that the results address those issues. Okay, and otherwise that means that you have not done, you say you want to do, but you have not done it. Okay, and that is not recommend, not allowable, not a quality research. Starts the result sections with the descriptions. Okay, this is usually starts with where you show samples and how you describe, how you sample them. I mean, where are your participants, and characteristics of the participants and things like that. And then slowly you can move on to address every single research objectives and questions, things like that. And discuss the measurement properties is also very important, because if your measurements are not valid and reliable, if that means that people cannot trust your discussion. So it is very important that you, before you analyze anything on the correlations, or on the multiple regressions or ANOVA test or on t-test, whichever, of exploratory factor analysis or confirmatory factor analysis or structural equations modelings or whatever. You make sure that your questionnaire design is valid. Okay, all your, I mean, your from quantitative, right? For qualitative, you make sure that the way you operationalize your and conceptualize your interview scripts are reasonably valid and reliable. Okay, so you got to maybe show some quick tables, how some of the interview scripts and how you all this interview script become the all this all these themes and then you aggregate all these themes to becomes variables or construct, right? And so you're moving from the open coding to of your statements that are important to your objective, and then to the themes of Asia coding, and then aggregating it to the selective coding, and that is measurement properties are very important. So after you have done all your results, then you start to, because you have already have a strong literature review, so you can present your result and position back to your literature review. So that is the purpose of the discussion. So this discussion provides a platform or sections where your results can be positions back to your literature review. So you're connecting back to the literature reviews. Okay, so discussions should be analytical, logical, comprehensive, and bring your professional knowledge, the finding of your results of your study, and the findings of related study, which is your literature reviews that you reviewed earlier, and then consolidate them and positioning them into a holistic manners. Okay, and that means that you should argue in light of the related theories presented in your chapter 2s. Okay, and do not report the finding but discuss based on them. Okay, don't repeat those data again and again. So the introduction and discussions together form an hourly graph shape, right? Just like our hourly graph is the literature review starts to want the larger backgrounds and that tells people what you want to solve, and then the particular things that you need to focus, and then slowly focus on your research objective, and then from there it go to the methodological section, is spanning all the way back to your literature review. So it's kind of discussion start with all your results, and then expand to the literature review, to your theoretical, to your literature section. So it starts with the narrowest part, answering the research question, okay, and then gradually widens and comparisons to other studies, and so that your research questions is already solved, no problem. Once you have the methods, once you have the way, and it's for sure you're going to get some data, but the data eventually has to fill the gap of the shape of the literature's repertoires or literature's context, which is the wider context of your study. So answers the following questions should guide and be integrated into discussions of the research finding. So what are the findings of other empirical study that support or fail to support your finding? And these are all discussion issues, meaning when you discuss your finding and presenting in terms of what other people has done, is your finding in alignment with others, or is the finding quite different from others, or is a finding in anticipations from your argument in chapter 2 or unanticipated? They explain all of them, okay? And how has your finding also strengthened and weakened the theory, right? So for example, you say that you're going to use that resource-based view, and how's your finding, has your finding been able to support the resource-based views and actually strengthen the resource-based views, or actually indicate certain weaknesses of the resource-based view? So all these things you have to discuss, right? In terms what theoretical assertion has your finding been able to account for? So which part of theoretical portion that you can support, and which part is not. You have to discuss terms. explain unanticipated, right? There's something you have not been able to explain. I mean, supported from which part of theoretical is not anticipated. You have to present. Maybe sometimes you demonstrate a good point that has not been discussed in the literature review, so that you have to discuss. So something in statistical insignificant does not mean it is not good. You cannot support your hypothesis. Maybe it's very important that you have an importance finding. Maybe you found that the hypothesis from this variable influence that variable is insignificant, but it because there is mediators that instead of going straight from one end from variable to another, it has to mediate, be intervened through another variables, and that becomes significance through another variable. So you have to explain all this issue, all these shortcoming limitation, delimitation assumptions, and so on and so forth. So discussion is you have to be very professional, very creative, very uh, aiming for synergistic and alignment and filling all the gaps so that it kind of integrating all perspective, but in a straightforward manners, no redundant area. So discussion is actually the most complex and important sections of your study because it is very integrative, synthesizing the theories and all the findings together in a holistic manner. So it really needs to be creative synthesis and develop the evaluation skills as well. So before you can write a good introduction, discussion. So do not waste words by repeating the result in detail. Only use the number and percentage if necessary. Otherwise, focus on the main logicals and intellectual issue. Okay, and do not ignore or cover up some inconvenience results, such as something and you're not anticipating it, the results review, and you should discuss. Otherwise, people will also know what you're doing, and they will pick it up anyway, and they will ask you why, what is going on, and then you cannot answer things like that. That would jeopardize your publication. And do mention unexpected finding. Therefore, because all this issue can actually uncover something very important and strengthen your papers. So try to formulate possible implication as well, what your contributions are and how people can use it, and in what sense and what way that your discussions are, that your results are very important, that you want people to know and realize that, such as the mediation, the mediators, right? And for example, instead of going from these factors to intention, maybe you need to go through other factors before intentions comes into the pictures, things like that. Okay, and don't just simply say, oh, further research, you have to do this, do that, and because doing like this is to some meaning, to some important degree, that is so important that you need to mention that is okay. But otherwise, this is like practically the same as telling people not to forget to breathe, which is not recommended, right? And the conclusion, lastly, serve to summarize and bring together all the main area covered in the report, give a final command and judgment. So it's like give people, okay, tell me, how do I, record your and get a good understanding of your articles in a one sentence forms or something like that. Okay, so try to think of it as a one-liner, citable statements that readers must remember and having read your work. So introductions is to give the readers the breathing in type of feeling that I gotta read these papers, and conclusion is like I am breathing out that I have very finally done it, and it was so nice that you release the emotions and joy and things like that. Okay, so part two. Part two is really about ethical conformance and integrity. And to do that, it's very simple. We do not need to go into the detail. You can Google it, but basically all are covered by this graph, meaning that you gotta, when you are researchers, got to have virtues. Your being, integrity, that whichever you do, you have a characters of doing the right things, right? And honestly and integrities and courageous and do not harm peoples and things like that. And then not only the being based on your wisdoms and characters, you follow certain on the ontological rules. Like for example, don't simply highlight people's names so that they get penalized and things like that. So when you introduce people, remains anonymous and don't report their name. For instance, those are simple rules, and make sure that your results are deliver utilities to people and has positive consequence to society, implications and values and things like that. So we have to really understand certain rules that we need to follow and certain, for example, before we interviews people, before we get questionnaire to be responded by people, we need to seek consensus and agreements and voluntary participation. These are all the rules, right? And things like that. And actually, the research ethics covers starting from the research paradigm. So it's starting from you as a researcher, and your ethical research ethicals remains valid and in conformance from your relationship, research relationship to the natural reality. So it's at the epistemological level as well, the social level, which I've just explained. And the way you do your methodology, as we already explained it moments hours ago, about the validity and reliabilities and conceptualizations and operationalization definition, all these are very, very, the sample size sampling, all these are very, very important, and quantitative, qualitative analysis and things like that. So all these are called and the nature of the reality. And if you assume the nature of the reality wrongly, you may get the result that is not necessarily projecting to the true nature, and that means that starting from the ontological perspective, you already not ethical. So ethical is about wisdom as well, right? If you don't have the wisdoms, you cannot be ethical in the truest sense. So ontological reality is also very important. And from there, once you consolidate your all this research paradigm, and uh, and then your paper writing and the rhetoric, the language of your writing, and the natures of value of how you present, how your research outcomes will be really also part of the importance context for business ethics. So ideology, the nature of value is that some of the value the findings that we have are, we have to be aware that maybe we are subjected to our influence of our own perceptions, and maybe there's some bias. So we have to tell people and discuss in the methodological sections, and so that people aware that we may be the way that maybe something subjective matters on our discussion, in what perspective we have to discuss it. If it's value neutral, we also need to discuss in our papers, okay? Because it's not much influenced by the mind, and you can use computation, you can use experimentations, and you can follow the natural law. But if something's perceptions driven, that really depends on how we interpret it or how the respondents interpret it, especially in qualitative study. And then we also need to discuss that value laden natures of our research and finding in the article, and that would prevent us and that will give us a good integrity in our ethics presentation. This is the papers that of myself. That, for instance, we talk about the language, the rhetoric, the language of research paper writing, and if it's a quantitative research, and then we can use mathematics, and that is no problem. But then in some qualitative, then we have to use most subjective natures of the language. So some quotations of interview scripts are necessary in order to demonstrate that we are not presenting from our own words, and we are presenting from the responses of the respondent, right? And so these rhetoric presentations are very, very important. So lastly, just to give you the epistemological, take the opportunity to review the epistemological perspective of research, which is our relationship with the we and the research And so we have, for instance, we have three important epistemological positions. We have positivist and post-positivist on the objectivism side, which means that reality is objective, is external to our mind. We not influence it, is there. We are just discovering it. So the way to the methodology that will give the integrity, ethical integrity, will be experimental survey, quasi-experimentation, and the purpose, therefore, because something is objectively out there, so therefore we can predict, control, and generalize them easily, objectively. If something is being value latent, this is value neutral, the positivism, something is value latent, that means that the respondents are interpreting their realities, or they construct the reality. And so there are multiple reality and context bound, depend on cultures or organizations. And the reality is being constructed. And the methodological section methods that we will use, therefore, is to try to understand the phenomena of what they're doing, what is involved in the issues and the reality, and from understanding how they consciously project things and perceive the issue, and through observations in the group's living conditions, and repetitively going through their text holistically, and see how their organizational behaviors and documents and sections and discussions are cross-reinforcing each other's to demonstrate and tell some story. Or we start from hermeneutics, right? We start from the theory, the rather from the data, and work it up to understand what theories are in place, are actually taking place, underpinning the empirical data and things like that. And then the purpose, therefore, is not really to predict, control, and generalize to wide populations, but the purpose is allow us to describe and understand the situations and be able to interpret what people's doing and the natures of the realities in that sense. On the other hand, we have another epistemological positions, which is called critical theory, which demonstrate that we got to be aware, value aware, that we are that certain contextual phenomena, certain contextual background like history, society, political environments could influence the reality. So if so we have to be very aware of all these contextual issue in order to so that we can change and relieve people from the original solution, and so that we can transcend the constraints and limitations of the current paradigmatic or mental models inferences, and get into a better ideologies or better reality environments, and so that we can break through our research. And because of that, methods in view of this change and emancipation and empowerment, the method therefore tends to be from the views of a women's perspective, feminisms, or involving people's researchers and participants together working on the research, participatory action research, and in solving their problems and addressing to transcend their performance level, and critically looking into the environments and also the observations of their environments where they are in. So again, all these are very important. So thank you very much for paying attention to allow me to give you the overall view of how to write the full articles, and also closing up with the ethical protocol, especially through the ontological virtual theories and consequentialism or utilitarianism perspective, and also in view of the research paradigm, because these are broad-based issues of business ethics, and it influences not only the design of methods, but also in terms of how we look at how we view the reality in different natures, can also influence the way we handle the research differently. Thank you very much, and so